Steve Moran here. I'm talking to Deborah Potter, VP of Consulting at SageAge Strategies. And Deborah, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about why people hate consultants.
Yeah, and why do I got to tell you, I'm gonna set the stage here a little bit. I
Yes.
will tell you that I think that people sort of instinctively think when they think consultant, they see dollar signs just cranking through their head, right? And the question is really ultimately comes down to if I spend the money with a consultant, what do I get out of it? So talk to me about you obviously have a different perspective. So talk to me about consulting.
A biased perspective for sure, but came into this business because I believed in the consulting role. So, maybe biased with good reason. That'll be my justification for now. I understand the dollar signs, but any good leader knows, and I don't think I'm speaking just from a sales standpoint here. I think multiple good leaders have said to me, dollar signs don't mean anything as long as I get more dollar signs back. And it's really, really, really all about the ROI, return on investment, which can be really impactful from a revenue picture with a partnership with a consultant. So I think there are other reasons people hate them too. So
Okay, well, what else besides dollar amounts? Let's tell why else they hate them.
I think there is a history of consulting being punitive in our industry. So, it's sort of like saying to the middle schooler who's had to write on the chalkboard over and over again, I will not talk in class, I will not talk in class.
Yeah.
Now write a great essay for me. And so I feel like we've used it as an industry a lot, very often, because a bank or investors are now very worried or concerned that something is not going right, or now I've missed a bank um, covenant, and it's sort of a slap on the wrist and kind of like a statement about lack of trust. And so then when we try to turn it around and say, actually, a consulting partnership can be so enriching for everyone involved, it can fall flat and people can fall back to that experience they've had before or heard about in the industry.
Well, I will tell you, one place I use a consultant a lot, and there are actually several places I use one, but I'm working on some new keynotes. And so I hired a keynote to help me get it better. I've got another one that I'm doing that's sort of a one-off. And I thought I was going to do it on my own. I actually am really happy with it. But as I got to thinking about it, I thought, Marsha's going to make it better. And so next week I'll spend a couple hours with her. It's not cheap,
Right.
but it will make it better than if I don't do that,
Yes.
and because she's got skills I don't have. So, um,
Yeah, I was just going to say, Steve, that for me, in our most successful situations where the ROI has been, hand over fist, absolutely worth the spend for communities, it has been because there's an acknowledgement that, look, we're not coming in saying to you, we know how to do um, we're not coming in to say to you, we know how to do what you do better. What we're saying is we have additive information. So, in the spectrum of what you do, you know your community very, very deeply, you know your prospects deeply. We know the breadth of the industry very well, and we're very familiar with all the tips and tricks and best practices that are practiced across the country, and it brings it down to, like, there's just no sense in reinventing the wheel. If we can bring something to the table that can cut your learning curve by a year's worth of lost potential revenue, imagine what the dollar signs say then in terms of return on investment.
so tell me a story about when consulting's been really successful for an organization.
Well, I have a few that are fresh right now. And interestingly, I use that story about things being punitive from investors and so forth. But I have three on my mind that were stories of investors saying, we're nervous to the communities, and the communities proactively, instead of waiting for the slap on the wrist or waiting for we are going to require you to hire a consultant now, they proactively said, hey, can you help? we want to choose our consultant. We believe that with some additive enriching information, we can get there where we need to be. Can you help? And then I think after that first outreach where the community really owns that instead of like, resist that, I think after that, bringing us into the team with a sense of collaboration can be really effective. So, in the last three incidences that I'm thinking of, all three communities were facing down a bank covenant. They had not missed it yet. And because we were able to work intensively together, they made the covenant. And in all three situations, by the way, um, these were not communities who, by any stretch of the imagination, you would say these communities are failing, their occupancy is terrible. It's just that bank covenants, I mean, we can be highly leveraged, right? So a bank covenant can be, are you at 90%? And with COVID and everything that happened, communities are going, okay, I'm 88, like that's pretty great. But now I need to get from here to there very, very quickly. So in all three situations, we were called in and we're able to, in collaboration as a team, turn the thing around and enrich the situation, give them some very practical, in the weeds advice that helped meet that goal and meet it quickly. And some of those situations were even situations where the sales team was either very inexperienced or maybe experienced in a different kind of sales, but brand new to senior living.
Yeah.
So it's been sort of a refrain after COVID, that sort of situation, and it's been really successful. The other sort of case study I will mention is we do work with two CEOs. They're in my mind particularly, who have said, just as a stylistic thing, we will never be without someone who understands the breadth of the industry from a sales and marketing perspective. And so you're just going to be our partner. And that's almost the very best scenario of one community that I've been consulting with for 9 years now.
Wow.
And right. And we are friends and teammates and everybody. There's not that everybody hates consultant suspicion, right? There's a trust that has built over that time, which makes us incredibly successful.
Yeah. Well, what I really like about that, and I think it's so important, in sort of that ongoing relationship. I've never really done that, but I see the value, and I
Mhm.
have sort of, if you will, some unpaid consultants that I rely on a very regular basis, right? Where I call them and say, "What do you think about?"
Yes.
Or "I'm struggling with this," or "How would you handle this?" And I think particularly if you're in a senior living business where you're also in a competitive basis, some of those questions would be pretty uncomfortable to ask to a peer, another CEO. And so having a consultant, it's a little bit like having a therapist almost. I mean, but maybe a therapist who can actually help you. No, I don't want to say that. I'll get in deep trouble, right? But sort of it's having somebody who can really, just you can bounce things off.
Yeah, and also I love that example. I will say also sometimes your partner CEO may not know. I mean, when you're in operations, you're responsible for sales, right? But it doesn't mean that you are super in the weeds skilled at sales. And it doesn't mean your pure professional CEO or executive director is either. And I think the cool thing about when this works really, really well is everybody respects each other's skill sets. It's like you said, I can do a lot of things, but my specialty isn't the keynote. So let me engage someone whose specialty, it's her specialty, and she or he is going to take it to the next level. And that's what this, really is. I will say the other reason I think people have that suspicion of consultants, Steve, is because I think there's a history in the industry where we called people consultants, but what they were extensions of agencies. They weren't people who had done the work in the sales seat, in the marketing director seat. And so there is a little bit of annoyance, like, you don't get to tell me that. And I think one thing important that we've done at SageAge is we have an agency side. I mean, that's most of our business, and we work collaboratively with them. And back to that respect, we understand, look, consultants are in the field, and have been in those sales roles, and our legion experts, and we work together on that, um, so that the person advising you in a consulting role has done the work and felt the struggles and felt the pressures that that person is feeling.
Yeah. 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 Having somebody who's done it successfully is so huge. It makes all the difference in the world because I mean, it's why we look at track records when we hire salespeople. It's why we look at track records when we hire CEOs and CFOs and COOs. It's why we look at track records when we hire regional directors, right? Because knowing that they hit the ground is really, really important.
And it's street cred, which we shouldn't underestimate.
Yeah.
So I have a profound sense that, and this is how, by the way, we approach sales training, that motivating someone to do something, to make a change, is absolutely not about the transfer of information. It's about motivating them to. So I can give someone the information all day, every day. Whether they're going to use that is a completely different scenario. So if I don't have a way of getting buy-in from that marketing director, if I don't have a way to get buy-in with that team, then I am lost. It doesn't matter what information I give them. Having done the role and and ensuring that we, by the way, hire for those for that ability to build relationships, means that we approach a team top to bottom, all the way across the team, as, how am I going to help you feel comfortable taking the advice that I have to give you?
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I suspect that one of the big challenges that consultants always have is, particularly if a CEO hires a consultant to work with people further down the leadership chain, it's that there's natural resistance because it feels like you think I'm not doing my job.
Yes. And by the way, something to say about that, it's not on the topic of why people hate consultants, but it is on the topic of how to make this relationship successful. The best way you can make a consulting relationship successful, if you're a CEO or an ED and you've made this decision to engage a consultant, is by presenting it to your team the right way. If it's presented punitively, if it is presented as a have to and corporate's making us, or any of those things, you have lost the ability for it to be really productive from moment one. And my team is going to have to go in and do a lot of backtracking to build that relationship. If it's presented as, we are all on one team, this is just another set of information and data that we have. They have the breadth of knowledge, you have the depth of knowledge. We're going to put that together for success. Or even, I believe in you so much, I'm investing in you. You set us up for success, and we are off and running at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, see, I love that. The idea of a CEO walking into a sales team that's maybe struggling and say, "Hey, I actually want to pay you more commissions.
Yeah.
And the way I'm going to help do that is I'm going to bring in somebody who will help you sell better so that I can give you more money every month or every quarter." What a great way to approach it.
100%. And when it's approached that way, it almost always works.
Yeah.
I've rarely seen it miss when it's approached that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're struggling in sales and marketing, reach out to Deborah.
Yes.
And frankly, if you're struggling in other areas, reach out to a consultant who can help you fix the problem. Don't keep doing the same old thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I think that's a huge problem in this industry, probably a huge problem in most industries.
I wanted to add that I will say that there are a lot of legitimate reasons about what we've done wrong in our industry in terms of consulting that make people hate consultants. But I think the other piece that's a little less legitimate is our own, sometimes our own egos and our own thing about, I just have to know everything or I have to feel like I know everything, get in the way of our own success. And
Yeah.
so if we can just sort of go, wow, what do I have to learn today? And what, how can we exchange information together and build this relationship? We just go so much further together. And the only other thing I will say, Steve, is you don't have to be struggling. Um, y- you can be plateaued. We have a tremendous track record of success where people are just stuck at 90 and they're leaving 5% on the table, or they're stuck at 92 and they're leaving, another 5% on the table. And it doesn't take much of an investment to get you well beyond those numbers where you want to be as a goal.
That's so important because I think that if in my reading,
Mhm.
I think you would find that most super successful CEOs have consultants
Yes.
because they just want to be better. And
Yes.
maybe a more practical example is I promise you that every significant top of the game sports star has a coach,
Yeah.
consultant to
Yes.
make them better, even though, and this is where it becomes pretty interesting, right? Because even though the person being coached is actually more skilled than the one doing the coaching, they still use the coach because the coach sees things that they can't see.
I was just listening to an audiobook called The War of Art. And if people haven't heard of that, they should download it and listen to it or buy the book immediately. But the guy's talking about Tiger Woods, the best golfer of all time, had a coach. And it is because you cannot see your own opportunities for change. So
Yep.
you may be better, but the coach may be able to see something just by standing outside you. That's it, to be able to make a recommendation that'll change things significantly. So, and when you talk about 5% left on the table, Steve, for some of our communities, I mean that annual revenue at 5%, if you're a life care community, you're talking millions of dollars. If you're a rental community, you could still be talking about, hundreds of thousands. That's the difference it can make, just overcoming a plateau where you're good enough, but 5% more really makes a difference for the organization.
Yeah. So even in a for-profit situation, I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, maybe millions of dollars. But the other thing is that sometimes we forget is that can translate into 5, 10, 15, 20 million dollars in capital appreciation because of that revenue. It just is huge, huge, huge. So
100%. And set you up for expansion and growth.
that's right.
That's the other piece.
Yep. Yep. So anyway, Deborah, this has been cool. Go out
So
and
cool.
hire a consultant. Go out and hire somebody. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your wisdom a ton and appreciate the relationship.
Me too, Steve. Thank you so much for taking the time.